Week 6 of college football is here. Matt Lane and I are here to break it down on today's episode of Barely Bowl Eligible. Stick with us.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome in to Barely Bowl Eligible here on Always Draft Season, your channel for college football, and we'll get into the NFL draft more as we talk about some prospects here kind of later on in the season. But we're getting you ready for week 6 of college football. Big slate coming up. I'm here with Matt Lane. As always, Matty, how are you doing, my
man? I'm doing good. The best college football slates we were going to have last week was still solid, but this one I think comes back too. It's maybe not getting quite the hype that the 2 weeks ago did. But this is a solid week. Like, you were able to sit yourself down on the couch and not leave it all Saturday and have good football start to finish. I mean, your TVs are going to be stressed at the noon window. Let me just get that out of the way. Your TVs are going to be stressing at that noon window, but they're solid games all weekend. So I'm pretty happy about that.
I think so too. That noon window is very tightly packed, as we had a lot of conversations about that, Matty, between you and I, what game we wanted to put in the noon window. I think it's a pretty clear first game that you want to put in the noon window. But there's a lot of really good, games out there, and we'll get into that. But Matty, let us what's your one big thing? I see you rocking a home field apparel shirt. Is that what you got on right now?
Oh, are you ready for this? We got the JMU Dukes coming in. We got James Madison, our Dukes. You know, the NCAA is trying to keep them down, but that's not going to stop us. That's not stopping us from sporting our Dukes. My thing, my big thing this week is it's October. Now is when my mind starts turning a little bit towards the NFL draft and not just enjoying college football. Like, I'll still enjoy college football because it's a different sport than the NFL. You have to embrace the fact that not all 22 players on the field are going to be professionals. And so that's going to leave you with a lot of fun stuff that happens, a lot of goofy stuff that happens. So college football is fun. But now it's October. I start turning my mind towards, okay, who are going to be the pros? You're getting into conference play pretty much steadily from here on out. That's a little bit stiffer competition. Usually you're now going to see good versus good a little bit more often, which guys are standing out. So this is where my brain starts to kind of tilt from, college football's back and fun to, okay, who's on the radar as a Chiefs fan going forward? Who am I looking forward to making big steps in the NFL? So this is that first full weekend of it. I'm excited for it. I have literally a whole notebook back here full of guys that I have to watch at some point in time over the next couple of weeks. And I'm ready to get that started. It's that time of year for me.
It is. And as we start always draft season, it does start a little bit earlier for us here than it does in other places, just because as the title of the YouTube channel says, it's always draft season here, as we're keeping our eye on some of these guys, some of the things to watch. It's another, as you mentioned, a good week with that noon slot. So let's go ahead and start right into it, Matty. As the 11 a.m. noon slot is kind of a no-brainer when it comes to picking the game. It is the Red River rivalry.
No. We don't have to be PG. We don't have to be PG. Call it by its proper name, Tuck.
Is it Red River Shootout? Was that what it was?
The shootout. It's the shootout. It's the Red River Shootout. We are not, as of right now, under obligation to call it the Red River Rivalry. We have the freedom here to call it by its proper name.
Let's call it the Red River Shootout. I just like the triple alliteration with the triple R's there. That's why I like the Red River Rivalry. But
I grew up. It's the shootout. I grew up. It's been the shootout forever. We can't change it just because, it's the year 2023.
I'm fine with it. Red River Shootout. We're shooting out here as number 12 Oklahoma at number 3 Texas. This is in Dallas. So it's a neutral site game technically. I think they always play this at like the Cotton Bowl, right? Is that where they usually always play it?
I think so. Something like that.
Yeah. But this game will be on ABC at that 11 a.m. noon time slot, wherever, noon Eastern, we'll say. But Matty, first impressions of Oklahoma at Texas. Oklahoma a little bit better than this year. Texas a lot better than last year.
Yeah. This is one of the best rivalries in all of college football. So I'm glad that we are getting this right now. This seems early for it. It doesn't, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not usually this early and I'm just completely off with my timeline. It seems early, but I kind of like it. Both these teams, Texas has been tested a little bit. Oklahoma's played nobody, and really this is like their last really, really big game, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a good game. In this game, in the shootout, anything can happen, right? Like anything can happen. It doesn't matter who's ranked, who's favored, who's, a pseudo home team. It's a good game. I think you and I are both on the same page that Texas is like a national title type team this year. If Oklahoma wins this game, though, their pathway to being in the college football playoff is clear. I mean, it's pretty evident. They just have to not trip over themselves the rest of the way. And while their resume won't be super strong, they'll have that Texas win tucked away. So it's obviously a huge game for the kids, for the rivalry purpose, but also it should be two solid teams. Like I said, I think I would Texas is favored in this game. We'll get to the line and picking it later.
Yeah.
I think on paper, Texas should win this game. I think they're more physical. I think they're more athletic. They have the better skill position players. They have the better individual defenders. Oklahoma winning this game would take some college rivalry shenanigans, in my opinion, but you can't look past that happening in this one.
Absolutely. I was just looking at Oklahoma's schedule because you brought it up. They haven't played anybody and will continue to not play anybody so far this season. They start off with Arkansas State, who they handled 73-0. Then they played SMU 28-11. They beat them there. They beat Tulsa handedly. They beat Cincinnati handedly. They beat Iowa State handedly. Now they have Texas coming up. But like after Texas, UCF, Kansas, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU, and TCU. They don't play Kansas State.
They don't play Kansas State.
They don't play the tough Big 12 teams.
And I mean, at this point, Kansas, who knows who's playing quarterback for Kansas?
Right.
Like Kansas, it won't be an easy out either way, but who knows who's playing? So yeah, it's just. Hey, listen, we can't look past the Mountaineers right now. Okay, they're out here rolling, but still, like that's a schedule.
Yeah, a very beneficial schedule for Oklahoma. But as you mentioned, Maddie, you alluded to, you and I are both pretty high on Texas, and just in terms of like who they've got, like skill position wise. Big fan of Quinn Ewers and the way he's leading this team. And I think that even last year we kind of settled on the fact that, hey, they probably would have beat Bama if Quinn Ewers was healthy the whole time if they weren't playing their like third string quarterback. And they went out and they beat Bama pretty handedly. I know a lot of people were talking about maybe that said more about Bama than it said about Texas, but I think it kind of spoke volumes about both teams. Truthfully, I think Texas will handle business because I feel like I just feel like this year's a little different for Texas. I don't know. They've got dudes. They've got Sanders. They got A.D. Mitchell. They got Worthy on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, that Brooks is running the ball really well. Quinn Ewers is slinging the thing. So I mean, golly, that offense is firing on all cylinders. They're winning games by margins they're supposed to be winning. They're beating teams they're supposed to be winning by. So I'm very high on Texas this year. I say. Obviously, as you guys can tell if you follow the show that we both are, but I agree with you that it's going to be some shenanigans, but we see some shenanigans in this game. That's the thing with the Red River Shootout is you see some shenanigans in these games. I can remember, Maddie, I think this was a few years ago when you were actually in Kansas City and we were watching this game. Which team was it that came back from like a huge deficit that ended up winning the game? Was it Oklahoma came back and beat Texas after a huge deficit?
Yes. Was that not when Spencer Rattler got benched for Caleb Williams?
Yes.
Wasn't it that
actually,
game? Yeah.
Texas
was putting it on him, and then Caleb came in and came back. Now, Texas ended up winning, I think, still, right? Or did Oklahoma come back and win? I can't remember, but it became a game, right? It became a game. Shenanigans. That this is always shenanigans. However, I will say, this Texas team under Sark right now, under Steve Sarkisian, they're playing like a team that competes for national championships. They're not getting distracted. They're not shooting themselves in the foot with silly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So playing Kansas last week, having their starting quarterback go down right before the game starts and coming out in a shotgun triple option, that's a game that a more talented Texas team in the past loses just by losing their minds on how they're supposed to play. This team seems to be going about their business. Steve Sarkisian's favorite drive or moment of the season was that drive against Alabama where he said everyone knew we were going to run the ball. Texas knew we were going to run the ball, and we still ran the ball. Like that was his favorite part. I think that says a lot because he's still one of the best game play designers in the all of college football. So I feel good about Texas. I'm excited for this game. I haven't got to watch Tyler Guyton that much this year. He's the right tackle for Oklahoma. He transferred from TCU where he played H-back. He's now a right tackle for Oklahoma. Very athletic, very good. This will be the first time, though, I feel like he's really being challenged this year by the Texas pass rush. Baron Sorrell, they'll get some Byron Murphy out there on him. Like, they have some guys that can bring a little bit of pressure off the edge. So I am interested to see kind of what that matchup looks like. And then you already mentioned all the Texas offensive weapons. How is Oklahoma, who Brent Venables has that defense playing, how are they going to handle all those weapons? Because anytime you leave just one of those guys in a mismatch, it can be lights out. And so I don't know if Oklahoma has the manpower to slow them all down or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think Texas on offense is just too much when it comes to it. But I was looking up some of the history. Oklahoma, after last year, obviously Texas won the Red River shootout last year, but Oklahoma had won 4 straight, and including that one that was where Spencer Rattler was benched. He went 8 for 15, 111 yards with an interception and a fumble. And then Caleb Williams came in the second quarter, turned them around, came back and won that game for the Oklahoma Sooners. But again, I mean, the last 2 years, the game was 49-0. So you're looking at an Oklahoma team that's coming off of an embarrassing loss last year. I'm sure they remember that. I'm sure that team remembers that well, and a team that isn't much improved in Oklahoma. So, Maddie, you mentioned this line it's not the weirdest line we're going to talk about today, but 5.5 in favor of Texas. Who do you got? OU against the spread, 5-0 this year. They're 6-0 going back to their last 6 games, and Texas is 3-2 against the spread this year.
Here's the thing. Last year, I know Dylan Gabriel didn't play, and not that Oklahoma had quit at the time of this game, but like it was clear that they were outmanned, so there wasn't a lot of fight. They'll obviously have a chip on their shoulder. They'll fight more this game. I don't think it'll be 49-0. Bold prediction. I think the issue here is Dylan Gabriel doesn't have a strong arm. Good college quarterback, but doesn't have a strong arm. And Texas's defense is really good. Like, if they just challenge him to push the ball outside and vertically down the field, I see Oklahoma's offense struggling. And I don't think Texas's offense is ever going to just flat out struggle against anyone but maybe Georgia. I'm taking Texas to cover. I mean, 5.5. We're not even talking a full touchdown here. Right. I don't know if there's a single position group, whether you're talking about a matchup or just comparing, D-line to D-line, that Oklahoma has the advantage in. I don't know if there is one. So give me Texas, more talented. I like the coaching staff better. I think you just got to get by some early game shenanigans of it being a rivalry with a lot of crazy things happening. And I think Texas kind of cruises in the second half.
I'm going to take Texas as well, just because I think this team's different. I think that this team is not to use a trope that's been overused a lot. They're built different than a lot of Texas teams have been. It's because their offensive skill positions, man, I just think they're going to be too much. I think they're going to put up a lot of points. I know that Oklahoma prides themselves on defense. Venables is a defensive guy. From Sanders to Brooks to Mitchell to Worthy, you're going to run out of guys. You're going to run out of guys to cover all of them when it comes down to it. And Quinn, you're slinging the thing too. I just like Texas too much in this one. I'll take them to cover as well. This is another game, Maddie, with an interesting line. Our next game, our afternoon slate, this will kick off at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Number 11, Alabama, traveling to College Station to take on Texas A&M. Texas A&M coming off of a good win against Arkansas in Arlington. A very interesting matchup where they keep playing Arkansas and Arlington. And those games are always weird. The Texas A&M plays against Arkansas. But first thoughts on this game. It'll be on CBS 2-3 Central Standard Time.
I think if this game was Alabama's SEC opener, I would feel a lot differently about it than it is now. Alabama has played the 2 Mississippi schools. Alabama has handled the 2 Mississippi schools just like you thought this Alabama team would have to. Suffocating defense, doesn't really allow the ball to get moved, plays great defense, and the run game gets going with Jalen Milroe, who has decided, you should never throw the ball unless you're trying to heave it 20 yards downfield. Very smart, right? They didn't have that figured out a couple weeks ago. So if this game came up a couple weeks ago, I think it would be an entirely different story. Now, I think Alabama has figured out who they are going to have to be this year, and they're going up against a Texas A&M team that looks really good. I mean, they have a backup quarterback playing in Max Johnson, but I think they know how to work with him. They know who he is. They brought him in. They chose to bring him in the transfer portal. That offense still has plenty of weapons. Their defensive line is playing just as good as Alabama's is right now. The back end coverage, see
Yeah.
the Miami game, might not be as good, but the defensive front is playing just as good. So like, I think you're going to have two defensive fronts really getting after it against limited in different way quarterbacks. And so we got a good old fashioned Saban Jimbo battle here. It could come down to the wire. And I guess the line reflects that. I'm just still surprised that it's only as low as it is.
The line for Alabama, they're favored in this game. They're going on the road and they're favored. Give Alabama credit, but they're only favored by a single point. I think that line has kind of shifted a little bit since it originally came out. I'll look up kind of the trends on DraftKings. But I was surprised when I wrote that in when we were doing prep for the show and I saw that Alabama was only favored by a point. I was like, oh, what is going on? Because I don't know what to think, Maddie, about Texas A&M. I really don't, because they didn't look very good against Miami. I think that Arkansas is a lot worse than people think. And so that kind of skews my perception of what they are. And I couldn't tell last week if Arkansas was just not very good or if Texas A&M was pretty good. I mean, you mentioned their defensive line last week. They had one heck of a game. I think they got a pick. It wasn't on the defensive line, but I think Texas A&M had a pick six on a screen pass. So, I mean, their defense is rolling. Their defense is playing well. It's just hard for me to judge where they're at. And you mentioned Alabama with like their quarterback controversy. You could put it in air quotes. I think I saw something that like Saban said that like those guys were going to play. So that's why he played them during those games. And it's all kind of weird. He's just trying to keep up the promises. You know, when in like NCAA 14, Maddie, when you were doing like the recruiting and you'd make promises to like a 5-star recruit to make sure he'd come, and you're like, oh, you'd be in the middle of the next season, like, crap, I forgot I was going to play him half the games. So then
my favorite conspiracy theory about all of this is that they knew the SEC play was about to start. Alabama had tried to run a normal offense to start the year. It wasn't working. They knew they had to change it, but USF is a game they would win. They were just going to throw out other quarterbacks before SEC play started and come out of that game going back to Milrow at a QB rushing attack. In that way, nobody in the SEC could be ready for it. Just entirely change their offense during a gimme week. That's my favorite conspiracy theory. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's my favorite one right now.
I would not put it by Saban to do something like that either. Okay, so Maddie, this line has even changed since we started recording because now Alabama's up to 2.5.
Okay.
And from the time I filled out the sheet to now, Alabama up to 2.5. Wow, that is very interesting how much this line has kind of shifted and moved all around.
I might have the rationale for it.
Okay. Let's hear it.
So I think yesterday I think the line had dropped a little bit. It got to like Bama, maybe -3.5. And that still seemed a little tight, but that made sense. I think there was a rumor swirling around that Jalen Milrow hurt his hamstring. I think that was swirling yesterday. And according to, now this is from the SB Nation, Alabama's Crimson Tide website, where they roll Bama roll, it looks like it is. It's a hoax. That injury rumor was entirely a hoax. So and that was posted 5 hours ago. If nobody else addressed this injury rumor until then, that could probably impact some line movement, running quarterback, injured hamstring, and then all of a sudden you pull that back and say, oh no, it's not injured, right? Like that's how I guess I come to the conclusion about whether or not, or where the line movement might be. I do want to talk about some prospects here that I got my eyes on, because we haven't talked about Texas A&M a lot. That D-line, I already mentioned it, is really good. Shamar Turner is a junior defensive lineman. He kind of plays a 3-4 D-end role for them. Very disruptive, very good player. Walter Nolan might be their best defensive lineman, and he's an underclassman. He's not even eligible yet. He's another defensive tackle. And then they have some, like linebackers that come on a blitz. Like those two guys, McKinley Jackson is, I think, a 5th-year senior. This D line is legitimate. They have rushers all over the place. And one thing that's really slowed Bama down this year has been a good pass rush, because their offensive line hasn't been great. So this team wants to run the ball. If they can't push around Texas A&M's kind of offense or defensive line, it could get a little ugly. The problem is on the other side. Malachi Moore and Dallas Turner, especially Dallas Turner, are playing on an entirely another level right now for Bama's defense. I could see them making life a living hell for Max Johnson, who is very turnover prone with interceptions and fumbles.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be which defense makes bigger plays. And while I really do like what this Texas A&M defensive line gives me, it's hard to bet against, Malachi Moore and then Dallas Turner right now.
Absolutely. And they've got Kool-Aid McKinstry, who going into the season, a lot of people considered him one of the best corners, but I feel like he's had kind of a relatively quiet season than what we anticipated him to have, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think there were a lot of high expectations on him. But Maddie, let's get into the pick here. As I mentioned, we'll change the spread to 2.5 since
Okay.
we're recording now. We'll change it to 2.5. You were right on with your timeline, by the way. This game opened at 3, got up to 3.5, got all the way down to 1, and it is now at 2.5. Let me give you some nuggets here real quick before I give you the pick. Texas A&M has covered the spread in each of its last 4 games at home at Kyle Field. That's an interesting one. Bama 3-2 against the spread this year. Texas A&M 4-1 against the spread this year. Do you like the home dogs at Texas A&M, Patty?
Oh man, this is tough. This is one of the tougher picks I think I got to make this weekend. Roll Tide. Give me Bama. I think this is the year. I think we're gearing up for it. I said this before the Texas game, and it bit me in the butt. But here it is. I think this is a team that Nick Saban isn't inherently upset that he's having to coach. This team isn't the front runner every single week. This team isn't expected to win everything. But if you don't think too hard about it, Alabama's right on track to go play Georgia for the SEC championship game. And then when you get to that game, all you got to do is win once, and you're going to the college football playoff if you're Alabama with a 1 loss to only Texas. I'm going to take Bama here. I think they're figuring out who they are. Smash mouth football, run the ball, get Jalen Milroe going downhill. It being under a field goal, it's kind of like a pick 'em. So that's why I'm going with Bama. If this was back to 3.5 where it was, I probably would have gone Texas A&M just to play the line.
Interesting. I saw Alabama at -1, and I was hammering Bama. I'm still hammering Bama on this one. With the 2.5, I like your thought process, your rationale there. But looking at the remaining schedule for Alabama after this week, they host Arkansas, they host Tennessee, they host LSU, they go to Kentucky, they host Chattanooga, and then go to Auburn.
It's not an easy schedule. It's not easy, but like that resume, you win out from here, and then you get to Georgia in the SEC championship game, and you win that one. Like you're going to the college football playoff if you're Bama, especially if Texas stays as strong as they have been. That being your only loss, especially early in the year. It's just, and all those wins might be 1-score wins for Alabama, right? 100%. But like they're okay with that. If they drag this into a mud fight and just win by running and playing defense, I mean, that's Nick Saban's comfort zone. And I think that he looks bad on the sideline, but I swear he is probably internally super happy that they are in a dogfight every single week trying to win games. I think he loves that.
He probably does. And finally, to have a year with not the national championship expectations and have that shifted to Georgia, who now has literally every game for them. Like, why aren't you beating a team by 40? How come you're not doing that? They're getting questioned left and right about what they're doing with Georgia. And let's continue talking about Georgia as that's our evening game. We're going SEC heavy on the slate.
Well, yeah, especially next year.
Yeah, especially with next year. Yes, we are all SEC teams according to 2024.
It just means more.
It does just mean more, as it's 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Number 20, Kentucky. Kentucky been a surprising team this year. They've been playing really well under Mark Stoops. They go between the hedges to face Georgia. Number 1, Georgia. Number 20, Kentucky. Number 1, Georgia. On ESPN, prime time, under the lights, between the hedges. Maddie, what do you think about this game?
Honestly, I haven't watched enough Kentucky yet. I watched them last week versus Florida, and it looked like Kentucky of 5 years ago when they were literally just slamming the ball down to everyone's throats behind a really good offensive line. And Florida had no answers. Can Kentucky do that to Georgia? You know, that's a different task. But what I noticed is Kentucky earlier in the season wasn't playing the same way. Not that they weren't a run first, defensive first team, but they weren't really just trying to smash the ball the way they were against Florida. Same concept as with Bama. Did they just know they had a relatively easy schedule with a Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron to start? And like, we don't need to show everybody our true game plan until we get into SEC play. Then they come out against Florida and literally just run and play smash mouth football again. Is that their plan versus Georgia? I know Kirby Smart last year, and now this could be Kirby Smart just talking guys up. He said that was the hardest game physically for his players to play in, was the Kentucky game. He said they beat us up. Now, I mean, obviously Georgia won. They ended up pushing them around pretty good in the fourth quarter because Georgia's Georgia. But it's just that's on my mind right now. So like maybe Kentucky does have a little bit more physicality that I'm giving them credit for after a couple years of floundering O-line play, and this will be a little bit closer. It's weird to see Kentucky try to go in to Athens and try to out Georgia. That seems like a bold strategy.
I agree with that. Obviously, Kentucky's coming off of a huge game. Ray Davis had one hell of a game on the ground, but I think that says more about Florida than it does about Kentucky, truthfully. Maddie, you and I both not sold on Florida, but it does seem like every time I turn on College Game Day, they're talking about like how they think Florida's good, and I'm just so. I don't want to take this away from Kentucky, obviously, but I'm just so confused why people continue to think that Florida is still a good team when they continually haven't shown that they are. I mean, I don't know. That's just my thought. But Kentucky,
I think the Tennessee game, the Tennessee game's doing a lot of lifting right now, right? Like you flip that Tennessee game and then they have wins over McNeese State and Charlotte, and that's all you're hanging your hat on. I think that's it. I don't know. That's my best guess, though.
I don't know if you follow Parker Fleming on Twitter at StatsOWar. He just puts out like advanced analytics, advanced numbers from these games. And I always find it interesting too, the projected points and the win probability. The projected points in his like advanced stats preview for Georgia and Kentucky is 27.27 to 19.23 from Georgia. So a fairly closer game than I think than a lot of people would think. But I do think that Georgia hasn't really flexed that muscle yet, whether it's because they are saving some stuff in the tank. I don't know. You can throw that argument out there. It seems like we go back and forth with that all the time. But they've hung in some close games. They've shown the ability to win these close games. I still think Georgia's Georgia, right? I still think that that's the thing. Carson Beck has kind of figured it out a little bit, especially when it comes to throwing the ball, I think. It helps when you have Brock Bowers, obviously. But I don't know. 14.5 is what they're favored by in this game. I think that's probably an appropriate line, especially at home in a primetime game under the lights against Kentucky, who has been playing some good ball. But, Maddie, any prospects you want to highlight? I think, is this the first time we've talked about Kentucky this year?
It is. And it's unfortunate because Kentucky is kind of the same Kentucky. It's just a lot of quality, good college football players that maybe aren't the best NFL prospects. I think JJ Weaver is a fifth-year defensive end that's been there. He is going to do all the defensive line stuff that you want. He's going to play the run. He's going to give you a lot of effort. Maybe not an exceptional player for the NFL, but he's a guy that will, I think, go on to play in the NFL, fulfill a Mike Dana like role for some teams. Like he's a guy I have my eye on. Verse clearly was going to be one of the more talented offensive lines he's going to face. And then on the flip side for Georgia, not my favorite wide receiver in the college football, but Ladd McConkey, I believe, is coming back this week. And I think that probably matters a lot for Georgia. He's a guy that they kind of have comfort throwing the ball to in the slots. Like what kind of impact does that have on their offense? Because their offense has been struggling so far.
It has been. And looking ahead at Georgia's schedule, it's pretty light, truthfully. They go to Vanderbilt. They go to Florida. They host Mizzou. They host Ole Miss. They go to Tennessee. And then they go to Georgia Tech. So they don't have, like, a juggernaut.
We said Bama can make the playoff with that one loss to Texas. I don't think that Georgia can lose and make the playoff this year.
No, I'd agree with you. Especially with the teams that they have left, you're looking at a loss to either Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida, Mizzou, Mississippi, or not Mississippi, it says Mississippi, Ole Miss, Tennessee, or Georgia Tech. Like if they lose to either of those teams, I think that takes them out of the college football play.
Who their best win is gonna, or even if they lose in the SEC championship game, like even let's say they win the SEC championship game, but drop one of those games, like they're gonna have like one like high quality win. I don't know, just Georgia kind of has to be perfect with this schedule. They lost that Oklahoma game, non-conference Oklahoma game because of the SEC stuff, and that kind of really hurt both them and Oklahoma's strength of schedule this year, and a year that likely both of them could end up with one loss, and that might cost both of them a playoff shot.
I mean, squeaking out wins over South Carolina and Auburn isn't really gonna be eye pop. I'm personally, Maddie, I'm surprised they're still number one when it comes to the AP poll. When you look at the way that they've been playing against these teams that they should beat handedly. And I don't know if I've brought this up yet. Georgia is 0-4-1 against the spread this season. Ooh. Georgia has not covered against the spread this season. Kentucky 4-1 against the spread, and as I mentioned, a 14.5-point spread for Georgia. Any other player? Did we talk about? You talked about a little bit about Georgia and Florida.
Yeah,
Georgia and
I'm ready to pick.
Let's
We're
pick
ready
up
to pick this game.
14.5 in favor of Georgia. Who are you taking?
Oh man. I wanted to take Georgia. I was sitting here. I was prepared this whole time to take Georgia. Finally getting back on track. I do think Kirby Smart's talking up the SEC about how everybody deserves to be ranked in the SEC. It's like I feel like they're getting to the point to where they're trying to build some kind of narrative. Like they've gotten to that point, like, oh, we won back to back. We're expected to win. It hasn't been pretty. So now we have to make up some kind of narratives to make us get more motivated again. I do feel like they're in the middle of that. So like I thought maybe we're on the start of them really getting to roll downhill. But nah, give me Kentucky. Give me Kentucky to cover. 2 scores is a lot. Kentucky plays them tight. I don't see an offensive explosion necessarily coming. So it would, to cover this, I almost feel like it would have to be a 24-3 type of win. Like it would have to be something to where they really just hold Kentucky to nothing. And I think Kentucky can not push them around, but give enough back to score some points. So I'm taking Kentucky here.
I agree. I'm going to take Kentucky as well. The 14.5 is a big, is a lot of points, and especially in a conference game, I think that's going to be interesting. Devin Leary, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks. It hasn't been his best season, but they've been running the ball really well with Ray Davis. Obviously, that's been a big thing for them. But both going with the Wildcats there. Let's move on to the Wild.
Looking at the history, every other year, roughly, Kentucky seems to have covered this line and play it close. 6-6, and then they lost big the year before that. 14-3, then lost big the year before that. 34-17, technically over 14.5, but like still not a blowout. Blown out the year before, close, blown out. Like it just seems every other year they play them close and then get blown out. I guess that means we're in for a blowout year. Maybe I should change my pick based on history. Sticking with the Cats.
Kentucky has covered the last 4 games, I think, in their spread, like the spread for the game, obviously not just that 14.5 points, but Kentucky has covered in the last 4 games against Georgia, and they've covered the spread in 9 of its last 10 October games against AP ranked teams. So
just an October team.
They're an October team.
Halloween team.
You talk about South Carolina being an October team, a name that I don't know if I can say on these here airwaves for the Gamecocks. Gamecocktober, we'll just say it, is what they call it. Kentucky seems like to be that October team. But you ready for the wild card games, Maddie?
Yeah, you know what? I think we should do a solid here and stick in the SEC.
Let's do it. Let's stick in the SEC. Just continue the trend. If you got a good thing going, don't ruin it. So we're not going to. Number 23 LSU travels to number 21 Missouri, to Columbia, Missouri, to take on the Tigers. The Tigers will take on the Tigers at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern. That game is on ESPN. Maddie, if you would have told me in August that the Missouri Tigers would be ranked higher than the LSU Tigers in their matchup coming up this year, I would have been absolutely floored. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Brady Cook has far outplayed what my expectations were for him to this point in time. And I think the rest of that team, I think we even said it during like the season preview. The rest of the team, I think, is kind of primed to be a good team this year. It was just, I didn't trust the quarterback play. Eli, that Missouri Tigers team, they got Brady Cook comfortable. They got him playing well. And it's working. They're putting up points. The defense is salty. I go back and forth on the defense being good and just being salty. I don't know where they quite fall on that scale yet. Like they try, they're physical, they hit, but it also seems like there's occasionally some cracks there that maybe will get exploited by better teams, roughly an LSU offense. Like whatever the over-under is in this game, slam the over. I think there's a lot of points about to happen. LSU can't stop anybody, and they're very difficult to stop themselves. So smashing the over on this, it should be a really fun game. And I'm with you. I'm just surprised. Are the Missouri Tigers the highest ranked Tigers right now in all of college football?
Well, I mean, they're higher than Auburn. Let me pull up the AP poll real quick.
And Clemson.
And
LSU.
And LSU. Oh, you know what? They mimight be.
USC, we're going to run Bama, Oklahoma. The Cougars, not quite a Tiger.
Not a Tiger.
Beavers, Ole Miss. Utes, Blue Devils, Wildcats, and then look at them go.
The highest ranked Tigers.
They are the Tiger Kings right now.
Oh, they are the Tiger Kings. If Missouri beats LSU and they don't tweet out like Tiger Kings, like all is lost.
Yeah.
Brady Cook has been you brought up Brady Cook. He's been playing very well. 1,400 yards, 11 touchdowns, no picks. That's been the big thing, I think, for Brady Cook and this offense. No interceptions. He just set the record for most passing attempts without an interception, with a stretch of like over, I think it's like 360 something. He's thrown that many passes without throwing an interception. Been very impressive by Brady Cook. And obviously, Matt, you mentioned it. We talked about this. We talked about this offense being only as good as it can only go as far as Brady Cook could take them. Right. So, and Brady Cook has been able to take them, in the win over Kansas State, which is looking to be a pretty good win, a very good momentum building win for this program. Now they're 5-0 going into hosting LSU in a game that is a pretty big game. LSU coming off of a loss to Ole Miss, where Matty, that looked like that Ole Miss game looked like Ole Miss got their swagger back. In that,
Yeah.
I mean, they look like Ole Miss of old. But this game is very interesting to me because I'm on like the verge of being really optimistic, because I do think I can realistically see a path for the Missouri Tigers to win this football game. If you go to the DraftKings Sportsbook right now, they have 7 players in minus money to score touchdowns as anytime touchdown scorers. That's Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels, Logan Diggs, Luther Burden, Cody Schrader, and Theo Weiss. That's how many people. So they anticipate this game to be a high scoring game. The over under total is set at 63.5. Missouri
Hammering it.
Missouri is 5.5 point dogs at home.
Shoo.
Listen, obviously LSU's got some talented athletic players. Malik Neighbors is one of those guys I just absolutely love to watch play football. We could talk a little bit more about their prospects, Maddie, if you want, but I just think that this game is going to be a little bit closer than that 5.5 point line.
So, yeah, Malik Neighbors has been great. He's been on an absolute tear since that Florida State game, but I would argue that Chris Abrams-Drain and Enos Rakestraw, like that's the best cornerback tandem he's gone up against since Florida State. And in Florida State, yeah. I wouldn't say he struggled. I think it was more of a Daniels issue on why he struggled, but it's still like that was his least productive game. So can that Missouri secondary do it again and then let Johnny Walker and all those guys get home on the interior? It's possible. It's certainly possible. I think LSU's also shown you enough that they'll figure it out offensively themselves. So then the question becomes, how does this LSU defense that has Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, shout out Missouri Tigers, then Harold Perkins, who is now playing back as a pass rusher more frequently, how do those guys not take over more games? How do those three players not combine and take over? Individually, those three guys are exceptional prospects. And for some reason against Ole Miss, even against, it was Arkansas before that, they just didn't really take over. We talked about how Texas A&M made life absolute hell for Arkansas's offense. LSU's front couldn't do the same despite having those three really talented, probably first round caliber type picks, or at least day two guys. So it's just interesting. Is this the breakout game from that LSU defensive pass rush? Like it's got to be coming. One of these games, those guys are all going to hit at the exact same time, and it's going to be really hard for an opposing offense. Or the Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, these guys just continue to rack up yards against a secondary that might be the worst in all of Power 5 college football.
And that's the point that I keep going back to, is that the LSU secondary is not good, and Missouri has they've got some dogs on the wide receiver category, the wide receiver position. They've got some dudes that have shown up. Luther Burden is on our dog rating.
Listen, we're about to have a talk. Keon Coleman might lose big dog status to Luther Burden if this keeps up. I'm just throwing it out there. Like we might have to have a discussion. We might have to have a discussion about Keon Coleman holding big dog status over Luther, because the way we're trending right now.
Luther's been playing very well, and like he's obviously living up to that 5-star hype that he did have. And I think last year I think people wanted to see a little bit more Luther Burden, right? But now he's playing more in that slot, which is kind of his natural role. With Dom Lovett going to Georgia. I'm not even sure how Dom Lovett has done in Georgia, truthfully.
He's like their second leading receiver, not been super impactful. Listen, Brady Cook was terrible last year. And that was really the problem with Luther Burden having production, especially playing a lot more on the outside. You move him closer. Missouri has done a lot better job manufacturing ways to get him the ball this year,
Mhm.
and Brady Cook's playing a lot better. So he's finding ways to hit him downfield more frequently, whereas last year it was mostly just Burden running free and Brady Cook doing something else. And so he's got that going. Like that, they've clearly figured out how to keep him involved, because you watch this guy move one time and you're like, nah, he belongs. He's a 5-star that moves like a 5-star type player, right? Like that's what he moves like out there on the football field. It's nice to see him actually getting rewarded for that ability more frequently this year, because it was very frustrating last year.
It was. But now he's getting the ball out more in space. 600 yards already this year on 43 receptions, 5 touchdowns for Luther Burden, playing like a guy we anticipate him. I've seen people tweet out like, hey, just go ahead and pencil him in for wide receiver 1 in the 2025 draft. That's how well he's playing right now. Obviously, things can happen from now to 2025, but that's how well he's playing right now, Maddie. Let's pick this game. I am a little biased in this one. What did I say? I have it written down as 4 on my sheet, but I'm looking at DraftKings Sportsbook right now. 5.5 is what they have. That line has moved since we did this.
You've been saying 5.5, and I wondered that. I wondered if we got some movement.
We did get some movement there. Let me look at the trend here real quick, because I feel like that line up opened at 6.5 too. So I think that there's been some real movement
and then back up. Interesting.
Yep, it opened at 8. So it opened at 8 a week ago, and then it dropped all the way down to 8 in favor of obviously LSU. And it dropped down to about 6 a couple days ago, and then it dropped all the way down to 4 when I filled out the sheet. And then since then, it's gone up to 5.5. 12 minutes ago, that was an update. 12 minutes ago, it went up to 5.5. So
big Friday movement.
Friday movement going towards the LSU Tigers. Are you buying that, Maddie?
Yeah, I am. I'm taking LSU. I want to be on Missouri's side, because I do like the way they're playing right now. I really like what Luther Burden, Theo Weiss have done. My belief in this game kind of has gone exactly with the line. I think LSU opened too high, but then I started leaning into Missouri. It's like, nah, Missouri's got this. Missouri's got this. And the more I sit on it, Brian Kelly, as much as we don't like him as a person, is a good college football coach. And they have good positional coaches and coordinators. And that team has a lot of talented players. If they lose this game, if they go back-to-back losses to Ole Miss and Missouri, things are in a real problem at LSU. I don't know if that team can really take that, especially after how high the hopes got last year. I think this is a game that they have to have more than Missouri does. And so I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Just at the end of the day, though, I still trust Jaden. Well, I don't even know which Daniels I'm talking about now. One of the Jaden Daniels. I trust him more than I trust Brady Cook to come out and not make mistakes with the game on the line. And that's no indictment on Cook. He's playing great. I just think I trust him a little bit more. I will take LSU laying the 5.5. I'm going to be pulling for Missouri, though, just so before anybody yells at me, because I know some people think that I hate Missouri.
It's an interesting dynamic, because obviously, Maddie, you know that in the transfer recruitment for Jaden Daniels, Missouri was right in the thick of it. Like, Missouri was one of the schools that were in the thick of it, recruiting him over Brady Cook. And Brady Cook was obviously already on the roster. They've done that several times with Brady Cook with different quarterbacks from around. They've been recruiting over the top of him. I'm interested to see how they respond. I'm sure Brady is well aware of the quarterback he's facing this week. And the opposite of him was a quarterback that Missouri tried to replace him with. And he wants to kind of, as a guy who's very prideful, a guy will want to show out in front of the fans for this one. Missouri has the opportunity to match Eli Drinkwitz's win total for the past 2 years in the first 6 weeks. So last year, 6-7. Year before that, 6-7. 2020 was his first year. They went 5-5 with that 10-game SEC schedule. But they can get to 6 wins in the first 6 games. That would be big for Missouri. I think a win over LSU again would be big for Missouri. If you remember back to Eli Drinkwitz's first year, they beat LSU the goal line stand. And that was a very high-scoring game as well. I think that total got up into the 80s. I think it'll be a high-scoring game as well, Maddie, as you mentioned. But I'm going to take the Tigers. I think I'm going to put my trust in Harrison Mevis. His ability to hit the long ball is going to be huge. I like Luther Burden. I like Brady Cook. I like the way they've been playing. This defense is very solid. I want to see them kind of flex their muscle a little bit, even after they gave us a little bit of leakage in these past couple of games, but games that never really felt out of their control, as I've talked about on the Mizzou That 2 podcast, but just sometimes the score looked a little bit closer. I think this game's going to be close. I think Missouri will pull it out. I mentioned the stats of war earlier. The projected points for this game, Maddie, LSU 31, Mizzou 29. So they project it to be a very close game. I think Mizzou will cover the 5.5, and I really think that they'll win the game, truthfully.
Let's go. Go. I wish you would have kept it as I'm taking the Tigers and not expanded on which Tigers.
That's fine. Yeah.
But
I saw you tweet something out about that, about like, I really like the Tigers this week, which is fair.
Low-hanging fruit.
It is.
Fruit.
Somebody's got to make the joke. Somebody's got to hit send on the tweet.
It's a burden that I'm taking on.
It's a cross you bear. All right. Second wild card game, Maryland at Ohio State, number 4 Ohio State. Maryland.
Let's go out of the SEC.
Out of the SEC finally. A Maryland team that is undefeated. A Maryland team that could put the nuts on some upset watch. This is another 11 a.m. noon kickoff in Columbus, Ohio, on Fox. What do you think, Maddie?
Maryland's not only undefeated, they got to have one of the highest plus minuses in all of college football. They've won by 32 points, by 18 points, by 28 points, by 21 points, by another 28. They're winning. They are blowing teams out right now, right? They got to be up there. So Maryland's playing good football. We've seen this story. Maryland playing good football. They go play Penn State. They go play Michigan. They go play Ohio State and give them a scare for roughly 3 quarters and then find a way to all of a sudden look like Maryland again in the fourth quarter and things go poorly. Do I expect this game to be any different? No, probably not, right? I think we're getting 3 quarters in. Everyone's TV is going to be turning over to Fox. I think the Red River rivalry shootout will be over by then. Texas will be pulling away. LSU Missouri will be a fun game. It's rocking on ESPN, but you're also going to want to have to get to Fox in the fourth quarter. I think it's tight going into the fourth quarter, but eventually talent wins out. Eventually talent wins out. And Maryland, I don't even know if this is the most talented team Maryland's had over the past couple of years. They're playing really good right now, but it hasn't been enough in the past. Do I really think it's going to be enough this year? I don't know.
I kind of tend to agree with you. Maryland's been one of those teams that's been kind of a fun undefeated team. And looking at the average scoring margin, it looks like that they are, in terms of average scoring margin, 10th in college football. So
I'd be closer.
Pretty good. Honestly,
Oregon's got to be way up there.
They're number 1. They're number 2. Oklahoma's number 1. I think they had a big win over
they won a 70-0 or something.
And then they hit it 73-0 over Arkansas State. So they've got that in their bag. So Maryland's played real games. So, but I don't know. This is a really interesting team, an interesting game. Going to Columbus makes this another interesting factor. But as you mentioned, the talent that Ohio State has, obviously they're going to be more talented. It feels like Tua's brother's been at Maryland for 12 and a half years, I think, approximately. But obviously an experienced quarterback. Maybe that could help them turn the tides against a team in Ohio State and kind of a quarterback, which McCord has played a little bit better in the recent weeks, that hasn't quite hit their stride yet.
Yeah, I had some high hopes for Talia there for a couple years ago, but even with that wide receiver room that Maryland was putting out with a Deontay Demas and Jacob Copeland, and we also had I'm drawing a blank on the 5-star Raheem Jarrett. He had all that talent, right? And he still couldn't quite put together a dominant offensive performance. And that's, not an issue, but that sticks to my mind. So now when you lose those talented guys, and Jashawn Jones is still a really good wide receiver for them. Ty Felton has stepped up this year in kind of the place of Raheem Jarrett. They're kind of working out of the slot a lot of the times. They have guys that are still good. I just think they've taken a talent step backwards from years past, and they still weren't quite good enough in years past. The one way that I'd see they'd even have a chance here is leaning on Roman Hemby, their running back, but he hasn't been overly effective. He's averaging 4.8 yards a carry, which is good, but for college football, 4.8 yards a carry is just fine, right? That's just a fine number. You're going up against a really good Ohio State defense that's playing exceptional. It's I don't know if Maryland's going to be able to push around Ohio State. If they can, for whatever reason, if they can do kind of what Notre Dame did, we might be in for an interesting game again that comes down to the wire.
I think so too. We look at the spread of this game, a 20-point spread. Whew, for Ohio State at home against Maryland. Now we've had a lot of Friday movement, Maddie. So let me go ahead and double check this. Let me double check and see if we have anything movement of that sort. Yeah, 19.5 now to Ohio State. So we did have a half-point movement.
What's going on here?
I don't know what's going on old DraftKings Sportsbook. They've been doing a lot of line movement on this Friday. But looking at it, I was looking at the advanced the advanced stats preview. 75% win probability, obviously, for Ohio State, but the projected points total is 35-25. That's a 10-point win for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Maddie, looking at the against the spread numbers, Maryland is 3-2, Ohio State 1-2-1 in games so far this season. I think we finally have a big enough sample size against the spread to kind of use those metrics. And one more nugget for you before I have you pick this game, Maddie. Maryland has failed to cover the spread in each of its last 9 October games as a road underdog. 19.5 points.
Not an October team.
Not an October team. This is not an October team. They're not South Carolina. They're not Kentucky. What do you got in this game?
20. We've done a 19.5. It doesn't matter.
We're done 19.
That's a lot of points. Last year, this game was a nail biter until like the last 2 drives, and then Ohio State ended up winning by 13. As Maryland, the game was close. Maryland should have won the game, but then ended up losing by 13. I don't know if it'll be quite the exact same way, but I could still be similar. Close going into the fourth quarter. Ohio State then clearly comes out as being the better team, not like it was against Notre Dame where it was just literally a coin flip. I think that's what we're looking at. 19.5, though, that's a lot of points to say a team's going to win by when I think it's going to be close entering the fourth quarter. I'm going to take Maryland to keep this one close. I think they're playing sound football right now. Ohio State has not shown me the juice to think they're going to blow out non-terrible teams right now. I'm
taking UMD as well, but only because I'm not as confident in Ohio State covering a 20-point spread and 19.5, I should say. Not as confident in them. I haven't been very high on Ohio State this year. I think they personally got a little lucky that Notre Dame only had 10 guys on the field twice towards the end of that game. I think Notre Dame should have been beating them. But yeah, I'm taking Maryland in that one. I think we're both going Maryland for that. So here is our Sickos game of the week. A hat tip to the Sickos committee. If you'll follow them on Twitter. And this is a purely despicable game, truthfully. At 2:30, 3:30 p.m. Time slot, Purdue travels to Iowa to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes. They travel to Iowa City, I should say. This game is on Peacock, so I think that adds to kind of the sicko-ness of it. Iowa favored by 2.5 points, Maddie. Purdue against the spread this year, 2-3. Iowa 2-2-1. Iowa coming off of they're the number one, I think, in the Sickos poll. The Sickos committee does a poll, and they're the number one team, which makes sense. Purdue is up there as well. Thoughts on this game?
Gross. Here's my thoughts on this game. Iowa, out of 133 FBS teams, is 101st in points per game. Purdue is 75th. These two teams are about to battle it out in Iowa with Iowa's backup quarterback, Deacon Hill, who, are you ready for this, Tucker? Is 6'3", 260 pounds.
He's playing quarterback?
Playing quarterback for Iowa.
Get him on the basketball team.
This is about to be so much fun right now. This is 6'3", 260 playing quarterback versus Purdue, who has Illinois' old defensive coordinator. We all know that Ryan Walters, we know that Illinois defense was good. I think you're looking at a battle here. How many points can Cooper DeJean put on the board for Iowa? That might be all that they score. Well, Purdue has Hudson Card, who I do think is like a real quarterback, especially at the college level. Like, there's an outside chance that Purdue can get a little bit going offensively because Hudson Card, I do think, has talent. So we'll see where it goes. But I'm taking Purdue because I can't ride with Iowa. I just can't do it. But this game is ugly.
It's going to be a gross game. I was just looking at the over-under set at 39. Iowa still favored by 2.5 points at home. Deacon Hill's passing touchdowns over-under is a half. So if he gets one, you're cashing that sucker in.
6'3", 258 playing quarterback. Like that's all. I just and he's not like mobile. This isn't like a dual threat.
Yeah. I'm looking at the anytime touchdown scores to see if I can get a anytime touchdown score for Cooper DeJean. Because it seems like their best offense is him, and he plays on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know if you guys know this. He's a cornerback, and he is their best offensive player, which is problematic. But 2.5 for Iowa. I'll take it. I guess I'll take it. I'll take the Hawkeyes, and I won't like it, but I will take it, Maddie. But any final thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
I think that's it. Like I said, I'm wrapping these games up. I'm looking for guys going towards the NFL draft right now. Shout out. Okay, we talked a lot of SEC stuff. There's some great Pac-12 games this weekend. Unfortunately, you better have the Pac-12 network to see Washington State play UCLA. That's not a game I'd want to watch or anything. If you want to get the Deion Sanders experience still going and see them, against, I believe they're playing Arizona State. They need to win this game if they want to stay on track to make a bowl. That's on the Pac-12 network. And you round it off. I believe there's another late night game. Maybe it's Oregon State playing Arizona, I think. Also on the entire day of Pac-12 network games that nobody has. What are we doing here? That's why it's all SEC this week.
I just Googled how to get the Pac-12 network, and I did not get a clear answer. So that's not great because, Maddie, when we were trying to make the schedule, you had given me a couple of choices, the Wazoo and UCLA game. And I said, that sounds like a big game. My first reaction, that sounds like a big game. And you said, well, it's on the Pac-12 network. And I said, well, we can't direct people to go watch that game because they're not going to be able to watch that game. So if you have any websites you like, you can try those out in terms of watching those games. But it doesn't seem like it'll be a very easy way to watch what could be a pretty substantial game in terms of some conference implications with Washington State and UCLA. But that's a shame. We were heavy on this SEC this week because it just means more, Maddie. Just means more.
Just means more.
It's a perfect way to end it. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us live at the time. Appreciate you watching after the fact as well. Make sure that you subscribe to us here. And if you like the video, hit the like and share it with a friend. As Pat McAfee says, be a friend, tell a friend. Maddie and I will be back next week with more college football and prospect action. So until then,
I'll be with you. I will be with you in Kansas City next week.
That's right. You will be. We're going to record this show live in the studio. I didn't even think about that.
I know. The people don't even need to hear all this. I just want to throw it out there. But I'll be next to you. We'll be holding hands when we record this next week.
That's true. The whole time we'll be holding hands. It's a fact. But that's an exciting thing to look for. So make sure you subscribe, like this video, share the channel with everybody that you know and love. So we'll be back next week. We'll talk to you later.